Good day, constituents of Washington County-4, and all Vermonters, and anyone who finds themselves drawn to my message. My name is Glennie Fitzgerald Sewell, and I am running for the Vermont House as a progressive for one of the Washington 4 seats, representing Montpelier. This is my sixth run, and I intend to be a bit more brutally honest in this message, as I always have been, but because of the way the world has changed continually, there's just a need for more openness, even more straightforwardness, in order to get the message across. So it's difficult to know what to say in regards to the increasing gun violence in our society. This is not only unconscionable acts against children, like the Uvalde, Texas, but includes massively increasing violence against fellow American populations of Asians, Hispanics, Indigenous Peoples, women, LGBTQ people, to include parents of trans teens, as well as various blacks and brown people, Muslims, Jews, and other religious minority groups. Hearing all of this, it's tempting to feel jaded and apathetic. As we understand, the violence isn't just with weapons, but the violence is turning laws against all of us and turning the clock back so that the overwhelming ruling class can stay in power. So there's something severely problematic with ethnic and other intersectional oppression, um, um, as it's the rule of our political, religious, and social culture. This contradiction in our vaunted American claim of freedom and democracy has to be faced down directly. We need to stop giving quarter to hate, the violence, disingenuous actions of so many of our national politicians. We must strive to be exceptionally inclusive of all people that enter our borders and our discourse. Crimes against children are are on the increase in our country, and we do understand this, as I've mentioned earlier. We see harm done to children, and our national politicians do nothing, and there is little uprising amongst the politicians. When the children aren't of the ethnicity that is seen as red-blooded Americans, they receive less thought, less grief, less love, and little to no real action. This is the same for almost all black and brown people in our society and other groups considered other. I would say that this is also true, perhaps even for the larger um, ruling groups, because nothing was done after what happened in Connecticut many years ago. Nothing was done. And the changes being proposed now and being signed into law are hollow pursuits at best, because we still openly allow weapons on the street that should only be in the hands of the military. Who hunts with an AR 15 other than hunting humans? So, whatever these changes that haven't come since the 90s, what really is it going to do? People are still going to be allowed to buy the most extreme weapons they can possibly buy. So, again, the changes are hollow, and largely because the majority of one particular political group refuses to make the changes, because the changes aren't harming them as a core, it's harming the other. And let's be honest, that's what this is about. It's harming the other and keeping the other away from having self determination in society. So I want to know, where are the pro lifers in this? Where are the for the children people in these crimes against children? We need to stop giving quarter to groups who have no intent in society but to politically to but to be political and religious hacks, and play in the theater of darkness, all for the purpose of power and money, because that's really all it's about. Um, let's go directly. Speaking of pro-lifers, is just why I put that in there like that. Women's reproductive rights should not still be a conversation that we are having in the 21st century. In all honesty, this subject was handled 50 years ago. Yet, our own government refused to codify those rights into law. Let me be very specific. The Democrats didn't code it into law. Okay, when they really should have codified it into law. And I'm going to be very blunt about that, which is one of the reasons why I'm very proud to be a progressive. Why was this not done? It seems incredible that a 12-year-old girl, or what have you, or 16-year-old girl or woman, young woman, can be raped and be forced to carry that pregnancy to term, that she can get sick and have an illness where she can't be pregnant, but doesn't know this until after she is pregnant, and be forced to carry it to term, and it kills her. Um, where crimes of incest and these other things can happen against women and girls, and they're forced to carry. Who has the right to make that decision for them? Both mental health, physical health. Who has the right to make that decision other than themselves? So this won't end. This entire thing cannot just stop at an ugly Supreme Court with those who collaborate with a woman who collaborates with women, against women, to make a decision against them, all because of religious notions and all of these other ugly notions that were in existence during the time of slavery, when black women were forced to abort babies, but and when it was used as a control mechanism. But we're not talking about it being used as a control mechanism now to allow that. We're talking about people being able to make that decision for themselves. Women being able to make women and girls getting the help to get someone to help them make that decision, and women being able to make that decision for themselves. Right-wing religious groups and phalanxes of old, bitter men are allowed to make health and body autonomy decisions for more than half the population of our country. Women, again, have no voice. What's sadder is that there are women who have collaborated with the decision to get rid of women's choice. We are only as free as the strongest chains that hold us. This is the true. This is true for those who collaborate to enslave us all in the name of life and God, and those same people who have no clue as to what either actually means. So, again, people involved in their own harm, involved in their own good measure, involved in destroying their own self-interest. Because when you limit somebody else's freedom and you try to destroy someone else, it ultimately and will directly affect your own, in fact, affect other freedoms that you say you have. Men aren't forced to get vasectomies, however. They go unpunished in ruining the lives of women and girls. And now the Supreme Court has codified that. This continued crime against women. And to be honest, women and children. Women who have pregnancies that can't go forward because of medical conditions that will kill them and the fetus. Oh, they're being told, oh no, you can't have that abortion, but they would have to because it's going to kill one or both. And yet, women are so devalued that there are people out there who have no right to make the decision about what happens to a woman's body. And there are people who have gone through it who have decided that they're going to make the decision for another woman, to force her not to do something because of their own issue, how they felt like it was their own mistake, not seeing the irony in stopping someone else from doing what they need to do to grow as an individual, however that decision goes. It's up to this current human generation to to stop all of this. The current group serving, the current people serving, and the current older, young adults growing into full adulthood to help bring this to a stop. To do that, we need to make sure we remain in step to stop these same actions against all other people. It doesn't matter whether you are a white straight male or a black trans woman or an Asian computer scientist or a nail salon worker. We must all stop this nonsense of violence and hate, or nothing else we do will matter. We need to get out, commit to nonviolent, peaceful, but strong protests, march beside the oppressed, and overwhelmingly make our commitment to democracy heard at the ballot box. Freedom and liberty's final defense is the ballot box, not the bullet. This must be, we must make that our highest intent. We absolutely must. And I know it's not easy, because the hate can well up and it can feel awful, and perhaps that's where that battle lies within. It's stopping that energy and trying to change it. I'll speak more to that. We've got to look at what we claim is our highest intent, our highest spiritual ideas, our best action from deep within our hearts to solve these issues. This is not to be confused with shallow waters of religious ideas or beliefs. We must go below the surface to, below what we believe, what we think we know. How am I defining spirituality in relation to politics, you ask? Well, so I once heard an author say, your politics in action is your spirituality enacted. Your spirituality in action is your politics enacted. Now, that was probably one of the best ways I've ever heard that put. I believe it was from Neil Donald Walsh. That's the simplest and most elegant way to answer that question, I thought. And we'll go back to the word spirituality again in just a bit, but again, I don't want people making the mistake of thinking I'm talking about something religious, which I'm not. Spirituality and religion don't have anything to do with each other. They're actually not the same thing. As much as people would like to think they are, they're not actually the same thing. They're conflated quite often with each other, but they're not the same thing. I think that as I mentioned 2 years ago in my last video message, we still need to consider thoughtful and equitable policing policies within our local and state law enforcement systems. That can't be forgotten about just because of all the other things that have happened. That remains just as true now as it did back in 2020 and before. It has always remained important. I wished it didn't take the murder of George Floyd in order for it to still be a subject, and still police are murdering black and brown men, shooting them 60 times, shooting a barrage of 90 bullets is what happened in Ohio just a few days ago. I mean, this is the kind of thing that keeps happening. It's almost like we're being actively ignored. And I don't care what the police look like. I don't care if they're black and brown people themselves. It's this habit is trained into law enforcement. Not all of them, but it's trained into quite a few of them, and that includes crossing the ethnic lines. We all say racial, but race is a misnomer and a fantasy. We're part of the human species, and we're different ethnicities, but it crosses those bounds, and the police ultimately get trained in the same mentality. And for those who would never do such a thing and who are honorable in being the protective force we need, and the people who serve and protect, they're so few and far between in the larger scope, and we need to bring more of those particular kind of law enforcers out. We need to bring out the peaceful and more incredible ones, and I do know a couple who deserve that, to be honored in that way, and to shine above those who just react with violence. But I digress just a tiny bit, but I wanted to really get that into the message because that's got to be understood. We need to be the leaders of the country in reforming law enforcement, making sure that necessary funds go to those who can be called in to deal with minor social disagreements, as well as equitably paid workers trained to handle misunderstood mental health issues and other medical needs. We need to bring balance to the funding of police as the security service that they are, with fair pay, working hours, and standard resources necessary to keep all the general public safe. This includes the necessary multicultural training of police. So funding needs to be a part of the balance that we seek, not simply defunding. Not only is that a misleading message, but inaccurate, especially when unbridled emotions are involved. We get mad, we get crazy, defund and take it all away, and then when we really need them, they're not there. So the idea is to rearrange how the funding is used in police jobs, and making sure that there are others called in to handle situations that involve mental health issues, medical issues, and these other things that the police aren't called in because you see someone walking down the street you don't like. That's not a reason to call the police. And that, to be very honest, if that's done, that in and of itself should be considered an offense, and not something you can be put in jail for, but something you have a heavy citation for. I mean, to be very honest, just to call the police because you don't like those brown people across the street, or those Asian, or those black people look suspicious. If you think something really is happening, no matter what the people look like, then call what you need to call in. But if you're actually reporting someone looks suspicious, but they're not doing anything that's actually suspicious, these are the things that really need to be deeply handled. And there are those who seem to get off on that sort of thing, who get their enjoyment from messing with other people. And we need to be able to weed out of the force, our protective police forces, people who just enjoy doing harm to others, and that's why they got into the job. We need to get that sort of element out of our police, not get rid of the police. The kind of society that we have right now, we've created the need for them. So let's try and make the best force we can make. Okay, with the best people, and there are some really good people out there who serve now. Um, I know a couple of them in Montpelier, and I salute them. So we have to find a way to build, positively transformative culture that does not revolve around fear and violence. These changes, these changes are not insurmountable. These changes I talk about are not insurmountable. If these issues aren't solved, then no effort we make in voting rights or other basic human rights will make any kind of difference. So we need to find sustainable solutions to climate change, not simply repeating the greed and the lobbying and the arrogance of the past. For instance, biofuels are unsustainable, snatching away necessary farming and arable land um, for food production. So solar is not enough. We need to work together to move our culture and our civilization beyond the Kardashev level of zero point 0.7 civilization. We aren't even at a level 1 civilization, where we still have not managed to break out of the zero level civilization. We've got to be able to create and maintain a power source that will run our cities and run us without destroying our environment. And is that possible? Yeah, that's actually quite possible. It really is, and I'm not being a fool believing it. Know that. So let's go on. We need to have inclusive democratic systems and processes that do not allow for the violation of rights to vote, including reproductive and bodily autonomy, privacy, and health rights of citizens. And this also includes the right to marry the legal consenting adult of one's love and affection. Okay? So campaign financing needs to be fully revised in this regard, locally, nationally, to not allow one group of people to intentionally bring harm to the rest of humanity. Not allow lobbying to bring harm to another group of people because you disagree with that group of people. Even if that group of people are what we might call haters, you don't have a right to bring harm to them, but you do have a right to have a voice. If someone else is bringing harm to you, and to expose that harm. And that's how we need to go about it, but not go about taking rights away from people, and pushing them into a dark corner, because all you're going to do is create a monster when you do that, and that monster explodes outward, and it's going to take you with them. If it decides its life is over, it will drag the rest of us down. So the whole idea is to get everyone to the table. uh, the issue that got me into making my run for the legislature had to do with housing and healthcare. That was way back in 2012. Now, though healthcare is a complicated matter, and I understand that, it's one that involves ultimately creating a Medicare for all system nationally. We need to move back towards the idea of making healthcare affordable, to be able to have the quality medical care necessary for everyone to continue to live, and make the fight for positive, transformative, and balance in our society. The very rich, middle class, and poor alike should share and receive the same health care. All of us should feed into it. It doesn't matter how we grew up, what kind of housing we live in, no matter what. Now, I still believe, as I did 2 years ago, for fair housing standards for renters and landlords. That was a huge thing for me a while back, but I feel like I'm a little bit more knowledgeable on the situation now, to include the help with court costs for viable just cause eviction issues. So, for instance, landlords that are responsible, ethical, and not in it for the money. Those who uphold the rights of their tenants, and not those who fleece them and harass them to no end, trying to force them from the rental properties. Not those, but landlords who are responsible should be recognized and included in creating a viable, just cause eviction process, not excluded from the deliberations. Now, I'm not sure if they were really excluded this last time in Vermont, but it doesn't seem like so many of them were heard in regards to court costs and having those costs transferred if they can't pay for it. Um, Something needs to be done to bring back to the floor and fully revise just cause evictions. Now, again, I'd like to be helpful at looking into this. Create a council of landlords not beholden to lobbyists, but actions in good faith that includes all involved tenants. So we cannot work apart. We need to work together, or none of this matters. None of this will work if we do not work tenants and landlords together. Forcing honest landlords, and they do exist, to bear the brunt of eviction costs will cause a great economic harm to tenants for whom the costs will be passed on to. Landlords also pick that cost up as well as their own families. So these aspects may have to be given a viable consideration in the past, that past bill. It needs or attempt at a bill. It's one of the it's it needs to be understood. This needs to be said. And I know that this is a hard one for some. Caring about tenants requires that we care about the landlords, and caring about the landlords requires that we care about the tenants. It cannot be one or the other. Striking the balance is what's important here. None of this matter. Remember, none of this matters if we don't make this work in concert. Nothing else we do will matter. Everything else will break apart. So everyone needs to have a voice and be heard. That includes us hearing the voices of those we don't necessarily agree with. Either we include all the voices, then analyze those voices for their best attributes, or nothing we try to do to change all other layers of our society will make any kind of difference. Nothing else we do will make a difference. And you can't just unlink everything else, because all things are linked together. All events are connected to all other events and cycles. The environment and social and political upheaval is connected to the energy that governs the spiritual levels of awakening. If anything, those energies feed into each other. Remember, spiritual in this context merely means a wider connection, an infinitely larger connection to all other things, to all other life everywhere, all at once, all breathing and living at once as one. That's all I mean here. We are not talking about religion. We've tried that, and our world has made scant improvements. We must grow beyond those things. None of this is about political correctness or other trigger phrases that people like to use. We want the same life, the same security, the same structures, allowing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This still needs to be the inflection point it was 2.5 years ago when coronavirus hit. And now, we still need to understand who we are. And that's what this process is all about. That's why I keep running. Whether I'll keep running or not, I don't know. I will do my best now, in the now, to try and become your representative. I'm going to do what I can do now. What the future will hold, I don't know. I can't say that. But I can at least make all the effort that I can now. And on top of that, the transformative studies and transforming the world with our highest intent is also part of my PhD studies that I'm working on as well. So it's something that works directly in through me, and that's why being a progressive really works, because I can put to paper and to study and to research being that better part. So I really appreciate being able to work that kind of thing into our political structure and our political cycle, because we can't leave that part of ourselves out. We can't leave that deeper, more spiritual part out. So the only option in front of us, I would say now, is to understand that the rights given to us as people are no good to us if we do not flex the muscles that make those rights work. This also includes thanking those who are running an opposing set of ideas. Hear me out on this. Without such ideas, we wouldn't know how to define ourselves, not as people, not as souls, This is why it's important to bring some measure of opposing voices to the table, at least to a rational extent. Those voices will help force us into making life so much better. I know that sounds almost counter to my message, but think about it. It's not. When you have someone who has a counter voice to an idea, they're, they're anti-abortion. There's something else going on inside under their voice. There's some other worry going on that has nothing to do with taking the rights away from women. Once we get it under control, that you cannot just remove someone's bodily autonomy away from them. We dig by listening to their stories. We dig into their stories and find out what is actually the issue, what has actually happened to them, and we bring that story to rest by helping expose what's going on in their minds, the fear they've had, an abortion they may have gone through, or something they saw go wrong many years ago and wanted to stop that. What can we do to bring that to the surface and then really put it to the table and help, but still allowing abortions to remain legal, more and more rare as time goes on, but thoroughly legal and safe, like it should always have been. But of course, if it should have always had been, it would have been, and then we wouldn't be in this predicament. So I back up on that. We all have it in our heads that something shouldn't have been. Well, then it wouldn't have been in my thought. So here we are. So I want to salute everyone that's running. I want to salute all, not just only the progressives running for the local, state, and national seats, as this is a transformative time. But I hold some measure, I hold some measure of human regard towards all of those running under their prospective political parties. Despite the anger I feel at times, despite the depression and dismay, and despite the ease I can nearly let hate creep into my heart, I am forced to stop that hate in its tracks. The darkness within must be forced into balance with the light half of ourselves. Even through our entertaining mythologies, we have a deep spiritual understanding of this idea. We tell it to ourselves constantly. It's time to stop ignoring the stories we write to ourselves, for ourselves, and about ourselves, and just get up and get it done. We can then go on and write new stories, better stories, expansive and growing stories. We all clearly want the same thing. Whatever any of you do, be the highest vision, the best, the most serving, and the fairest version of yourself. To do otherwise is just a dishonor to yourself and to life itself. I consider the act of serving all Vermonters an honor. I will not make empty political promises for votes or use the current ugliness, hate, and exposed acts of a politically acknowledged Supreme Court judicial vengeance to score political points. Those energies don't need help from me. The Alito and Thomas and all these people have made the ugliness known to us. They've exposed themselves in that way openly, and upon other things going on in our culture involving these people and people who are close to them being involved and ripping apart our government and ripping apart our peoples and letting hate, anger, and deceit and ugliness reign. This has all been in open discussion anyway. We see it, and for those who collaborate with it and who are into it, well, we'll just have to see where that takes you as a person, as a soul, as a being. Maybe we're all playing a role. Maybe we're all playing a role on a stage in order to learn or understand or create an ultimate reality. Maybe even feeling the anger and feeling the hate is part of getting over it, getting through it, getting beyond it, and figuring out what we've learned from all the parts that everyone on stage has played. It's all possible. It's all thoroughly possible. And yes, I've written about this kind of thing before, so even I constantly have these kind of progressive ideas and thoughts. But putting it to paper and making the changes and doing the kinds of things that we need to do is where I am with this. So I'll do all I can to give Vermonters their national voice in Montpelier and their state voice. I refuse to forsake my spiritual values for political and economic profit and convenience. I trust Montpelier will have me as one of their representatives in the state legislature. I will serve the assembly to the very best of my abilities. Be well, everyone. And I hope to see you at the polls in August and hopefully November as well. Be well and go carefully.